Hello again. As I'm sure we all know, these days the sight of any large body of white people causes raised eyebrows and combined with calls for increased diversity, by which of course is meant more black people. This can create problems. Take for example the English touring opera orchestra, which has been travelling around Britain for many years now, entertaining audiences by playing music from well-known operas. Now, I happen to be something of an opera fan myself, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. In fact, to tell the truth, opera is very much of middle class white interest, which means that most of those who pay to see the English touring opera do tend to be white. Now, in a normal, sensible world, this should not represent any problem at all. The best sitar players tend to be Indians like Ravi Shankar. Black people are generally better at African drumming than white folks, and those who handle violins and cellos with the greatest proficiency are usually white Europeans. This doesn't mean that a white person cannot play the sitar, obviously, or that a black man cannot learn the violin. Of course there are black violinists, as there are white sitar players and white African drummers. But generally, these are purely cultural matters. These are instruments which one minority or ethnicity or another will tend to focus on. The grant-making bodies which fund the English touring opera, though, principally the Arts Council, have noted with dismay that most of the musicians in it are white and that they will insist on playing old music from European operas. And it's been decided that this state of affairs must be remedied. It has also been observed that most of the people going to hear the English touring opera are also white. Very few black people tend to want to go and hear it as things stand. Funding is therefore under threat unless there is an increase in diversity and also the orchestra becomes less exclusive and more modern and relevant. It's very likely that the plug will be pulled on it. As a result, the English touring opera are getting rid of half their musicians, all of them white, so that they can replace them with black people and Asians. I give a link in the description to this video to a piece about this from the Musicians Union website. There are two problems here. The first is that most people who play the violin, cello or flute well, or very well, are white. This means that it's fairly easy to recruit very good musicians. If you audition 100 white violinists, then you're sure to find at least 2 or 3 who are absolutely brilliant players. This is not so easy to do with black violinists because there's so few of them. It's purely a matter of statistics. I need hardly point out that there is absolutely nothing to stop a black person becoming a brilliant violinist. But statistically, you need more and more violinists in order to come up with a few that are truly brilliant. There's simply not that many black violinists. Because of this, you might be lucky if you're running auditions to come across half a dozen black violinists. And so statistically, the odds of one of those 6 being a first-class player are much less than if you have 100 to choose from. This means that in the interest of diversity, you'll end up hiring a mediocre musician just because he or she is black and it looks good in photographs. This is unfortunate because some of the individual players in this orchestra have been identified and commended in recent years for their virtuosity. You might do better finding a large group of Japanese or Chinese violinists from whom to choose, but this will not impress potential funders as much as seeing a lot of Africans and Caribbeans in the orchestra. Much the same will apply to people from South Asia, those of Asian or Pakistani heritage. Again, for reasons which we needn't go into, few choose to become professional musicians, especially violinists, flautists and so on. Again, you will simply have to make do with what you can find, and if you come across a Pakistani cellist, you'll be lucky to get him, however well or poorly he can play. The overall effect of this will inevitably be to lower the quality of the playing, because you are no longer selecting musicians simply for their ability to play their instruments wonderfully. They may look diverse, which will bring in the funding, but their playing will not be so good. Then there is the question of making them a modern orchestra. Inevitably, this will mean dropping old favourites, tunes from Mozart, Bizet and Verdi, and replacing them with Gershwin or Stravinsky. This is very often not what audiences want to hear, and so you will see a dropping off in interest, fewer tickets being sold. The audience too is under scrutiny by funders, and so there will be an incentive to experiment with African music and so on, and perhaps to offer free tickets to youth clubs and schools. The way that you get black people into things like Shakespeare productions or opera is often by giving out free or heavily subsidised tickets. I saw a brilliant production of Othello at the Hackney Empire a few years ago. There were a lot of black people there, and chatting to some of my friends, I discovered they nearly all got free tickets. It's a long story behind this, but whenever you go to something like an opera or a play and you see loads and loads of black people, you ask around, you usually find that it's been rigged by being subsidised. In short, a marvellous piece of cultural heritage is being dismantled before our eyes, simply for being white and European. I think most of us see similar things happening in other fields, and it is far from certain that this process is always an unqualified success.